everyone, welcome back to the Hardware News Recap of the Week. In this one, we'll be talking about Amazon's AWS outage taking out like half of the internet, bunch of games and some other stuff too. Also, Frore has a new LiquidJet cooling solution. It's not intended for consumer, at least not right now, but it is pretty cool. Additionally, DRAM prices appear to be going up, maybe in part due to AI. On the good news side of things, Intel's B580 GPU has been dropping in price. So that was in the UK, and we checked it's in the US as well. The 9070 XT is getting a Lenovo OEM version, and then there's a couple of other stories that we'll be talking about as well, such as AMD potentially looking to use Intel's fabs for some of its products. That and more. Let's get into it. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Montech HSO1 and HSO2 cases. The HSO1 and HSO2 cases differ by way of a mesh front or a curved glass front. We previously reviewed these cases in our intensive benchmarking process and found them to be overall high build quality, with thermals comparable between the two designs. The rear chamber of the case uniquely brings the power supply forward and perforates the rear wall of the case, allowing for more air movement internally while providing a different look. The rear of the case uses a fan mounting mechanism for two separate fans that can be coupled together with a plate, improving convenience. The HSO1 and HSO2 also invert with minimal effort, allowing the computer to present to the opposite side without needing to reconfigure the entire build. Learn more at the links in the description below. All right, up first, we recently noticed that memory prices are starting to climb. This is for DDR4 and DDR5, and we were looking around. It looks like in some instances, it's as much as 40 to 50% in a span of months. And we first became aware of the price increase because some of you all were posting in comments asking about cost of memory. And when we checked, it doesn't look good. And this is going to come back to everyone's favorite buzzword, buzz letters, AI. Checking PC Part Picker's trend history chart, we saw that a 32GB dual stick kit of DDR5 6000 has climbed substantially since September. For those keeping track at home, September is before October and October is now. So it's already going up a lot in a very short period of time. The average price of this spec has seen an increase to around $170 to $180 from about $130 1 month prior. The chart shows an impressively stable price history going back to May of 2024. With a few dips and spikes in between. Now, it's climbing rapidly. The DDR5 5600 2x16GB price, also on PC Part Picker, also shows a climb to around $160 on average from about $100 to $110 at the beginning of September. That's about a 50% increase or so in just 1 month. DDR5 5200 isn't safe either, surpassing its price even in May of 2024. DDR5 4800 also shows a price increase of about 40 to 50% or so, and even DDR4 3600 is spiking, climbing from around $70 to $80 to around $150, $160 or so for a 2x16GB kit since June of 2025. Now this one's a little bit compounded because DDR4 also has dwindling supply as people have switched over to DDR5 production primarily, and so it's compounding the issues of lower production plus all the other factors that are affecting DDR5 as well. So demand isn't only from consumers here. Honestly, it's probably primarily not from consumers at this point, end users. So looking into this, we recalled a story about AI's use of memory. And on AI's quest to take over the world, or in the very least, keep expanding the base of the triangle, we noticed that Tom's Hardware reported that OpenAI is looking to consume up to 40% of the world's DRAM production down the road. 40%! Hot dram! Did you get it? It's because Reuters reported that Samsung and SK Hynix have, quote, signed letters of intent to supply memory chips for OpenAI's data centers, end quote. These would fuel OpenAI's Stargate project, which is a $500 billion AI infrastructure initiative that the company announced earlier this year. And for Stargate, instead of working with Richard Dean Anderson, they'll be working with Oracle. Big downgrade. It's kind of like working directly with the Goa'uld. Stargate is a project in collaboration with financial engineering firm OpenAI, most hated tech company Oracle, and supplier of hard cash SoftBank. It aims to do the impossible. Not because it's high tech or anything, but because it is literally impossible to build the amount of data centers that they want to build in the time span they want to build them with the power and water supply that they have available at their disposal. But there's good news. If we just rely upon yet to be deployed technologies and energy production, then everything will be fine. For example, if we can get that Dyson sphere up and running around the sun, we should be good for just about any data center needs we have. There are three major memory suppliers: Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. Two of them are named in this deal. They are SK Hynix and Samsung, and these are both based in South Korea. The presidential advisor in South Korea said that OpenAI plans to purchase 900,000 undiced semiconductor wafers in 2029. Undiced simply means that they have not cut them apart into the individual pieces of silicon that come out of them. So they're the disks, basically. According to Reuters, an analyst estimated that this would amount to more than $70 billion. In a Samsung press release talking about its partnership with OpenAI, the South Korean company stated that OpenAI's memory demand is projected to reach up to 900,000 DRAM wafers a month. According to Tom's Hardware, which is citing firm Tech Insights, this would represent roughly, quote, 40% of total DRAM output, end quote. Tom's cited research firm Tech Insights, which is paywalled for a few things, such as underscoring global 300mm wafer supply, or 12-inch wafers, at 10 million wafer starts per month. This would include all semiconductor types that use 12-inch wafers, which also includes CPU and GPU components, in addition to memory and whatever else may use them. That means for this project alone, nearly 10% of the supply is consumed when factoring all 300mm wafer production. And that would be supply for everything. There are other factors at play too. One of them continues to be tariffs. There's been ongoing news about tariffs more recently affecting the semiconductor side of the business, which affects this. And consumer DRAM prices in general are going up from a combination of economic conditions, the tariffs, the AI demand being as large as it is, and this will continue to worsen the situation. Now, this is just, I think, another example of end users getting screwed, while the multi-billion and now multi-trillion-dollar companies continue to chase unicorns. Except this time the unicorn is Sam Altman, and he's crop dusting everyone while they're chasing him. Overnight on the 19th to the 20th, Amazon's Web Services Solutions, or AWS, suffered an outage that took out basically half the internet. The outage affected a lot of games, but also Amazon itself, Amazon's spyware, Alexa, and things like Roblox, Fortnite, the Epic Games Store, Snapchat I saw was down, Ring cameras had some issues, Reddit, Coinbase, Robinhood, Venmo, and plenty more on the list using AWS, all affected in some capacity by this outage. Fortnite posted on Twitter about the outage, as did just about everybody else. The issue has since been resolved by the time this video is going up, with Amazon posting regular updates to its AWS health page. At 12:11 a.m. PDT on the 20th, Amazon reported higher error rates and worse latencies for one region. These updates later indicated the DynamoDB endpoint experienced the high error rates. Amazon later identified DynamoDB as a potential root cause. We aren't familiar with DynamoDB, but a quick search suggests that it's a commonly used database service that applications and sites built on AWS commonly rely upon. The Verge reported that even alarms set via Alexa weren't working as a result of this. Just an idea here. You don't need the internet for an alarm. We shouldn't be connecting our alarms to the internet. It seems like a great data point for the companies to have, though, when you need to wake up or go somewhere or whatever it is you're using your alarms for. And this is maybe a good lesson for why we don't connect alarms to the internet. It doesn't really serve much value, and certainly it gives them a lot of value. I can't imagine if I were still going to school age, like if we were back in high school, I can't imagine showing up late to school and being like, sorry, AWS was out, I didn't wake up on time. I don't think that would fly, although maybe times have changed. Anyway, by the time this video goes up, the issue should be fully resolved. It's mostly resolved at the time we're filming this. Seems like about half the internet went out. We're not really sure the exact percentage, but it was pretty much every major website and service, and probably highlights the risk of over-reliance on one company. Up next, we saw a few stories about Intel CPU prices going up around the world. We looked around some of the US pricing as well, just to see how that's being affected, if at all. And this kind of started for us, at least, with Korean PC enthusiast Harukaze5719, who tweeted about some of the price changes regarding the 12th and 14th gen Intel CPUs, and especially the prices increasing in Korea. Harukaze shared that the 14100F was increasing from 121,000 South Korean won to 140,000 won. The 12400F going from 159,000 to 177,000. the 14400F increasing from 215,000 to 229, and the 14600KF rising from 263,000 to 298,000 won. These are increases in the range of about 6% to 15% or so, depending on which one you're looking at, plus or minus a bit. And Japanese PC site Gazlog.com echoed that Intel CPU prices were also increasing in Japan. The site wrote, which has been machine translated, quote, "The entry-level Core i3 14100 model with integrated GPU has seen a notable price increase, with the lowest price increasing by about 10% as of October 10th compared to the end of September," end quote. The publication added, quote, "The Core i5 14400F was priced at 19,800 yen until mid-September, but is now 23,780, a price increase of approximately 20%. The Core i5 14400 has also seen a price increase of approximately 11%, end quote. Gazlog also noted that the 14600KF was priced at 30,000 yen in September, but then rose to 34,000 yen. As we were putting this story together, Chinese semiconductor site Jiwei.com corroborated the price hikes and wrote in a post that's been machine translated, quote, "Recently, according to relevant reports, Intel is planning to make price adjustments for its 13th generation Raptor Lake and 14th generation Raptor Lake refresh processors, up to 10%. Although this adjustment is mainly aimed at the US market, the price increase in international markets is more significant, and in some regions, it's even as high as 20%. It's worth noting that this price increase not only involves Raptor Lake, but also extends to the 12th generation Alder Lake processors," end quote. We looked at US pricing for all of the aforementioned Intel CPUs using camel.com and PC Part Picker, and we didn't see any irregular price hikes as of yet, at least for the ones we checked, with the exception of the 14400, which was under $190 in September, and at the time we wrote this was around $212. We checked PC Part Picker and found the i5 14400 does show a price increase, but that can also happen if it's going to go out of stock soon. The 14900K's price is relatively stable, as is the newer 285K, although it's slightly elevated right now. The 14600K is still going through its usual peak and low cycling. The 12700K has gone up significantly, but we're not sure if it's still in any meaningful production or any production at all. So at this point, other than Jiwei reporting that this is primarily targeted at the US, we don't know to what extent these prices will affect the US. There's good news. There's not really much of a reason to buy an Intel CPU in these categories right now. The bad news is this will also affect the willingness or necessity of AMD to modulate its own prices, other than in the up direction. So there's good and there's bad with this, I guess. Generally it's bad when prices go up, even if you don't want to buy the thing, because the competition will reflect that. But anyway, it's not clear to us why specifically the older CPUs are the ones targeted to rise in price. This typically does happen as things exit production, but this looks to be a bit different from what we usually see with just a production winds down and then a price hike from whatever's left in stock. And its Arrow Lake processors, from what we saw so far, don't seem to be following suit. Tom's Hardware had a theory that we think makes sense. They were kind of suggesting that it's due to Intel's reliance on TSMC. They wrote, quote, "Increasing prices for Alder Lake and Raptor Lake may potentially enhance Intel's profit margins. The chip maker is manufacturing these chips using the Intel 7 process node, which is now fully mature and likely operating at full capacity. Conversely, Arrow Lake relies on a variety of external process nodes supplied by TSMC, so there's limited wiggle room for pricing flexibility. Therefore, instead of lowering prices for Arrow Lake, it's more feasible for Intel to elevate prices for processors produced on its in-house nodes, which it directly controls." Now time for some good news in pricing, which is some of them coming down. So the B580 has seen a somewhat substantial price drop in the UK. We checked on the US as a result of seeing this story in the UK, and it's actually been trending down in the US as well. While Intel's CPU price is rising in parts of the world, according to Overclock3D.net, the company's B580 GPU has dropped below 200 GBP in the UK. The card launched less than a year ago and originally carried a £250 suggested retail price. As we noted in our review when the Battlemage card launched, it offered considerable value compared to the RTX 4060 and RX 7600 and represented a noticeable step up from Intel's prior generation Alchemist GPUs. This price drop makes it an even better deal, especially as the primary competition in this price range is relatively anemic with the RTX 5050. The B580 comes with 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and according to overclock3d.net for the UK market, UK consumers would need to spend around £330 at least to get a 12 gigabyte card from either AMD or NVIDIA. It's not that simple as just the capacity, but at least that's kind of how it stacks up using that metric. We looked at the US side of things as well. On our side of the pond, the card has finally come down to MSRP from an elevated price for most of the year. It's around $250 to $270 now, where the card was commonly $300 and over earlier this year. Up next, Lenovo has a new desktop, sort of. It's a desktop computer, but it has a mobile processor in it. It's the 7000P Blade Edition desktop. And interestingly, they also have their own AMD RX 9070 XT that's going to be an OEM Lenovo design. First off, while it is a desktop, it can be outfitted with either a Ryzen 9 9955 HX3D or a Ryzen 9 8945 processor, which are traditionally mobile processors. Looking at the 9955 HX3D's product page, AMD lists its default TDP at 55 watts, but Lenovo advertises the chip as being a 162 watt part. Lenovo is likely utilizing AMD's CTDP, or configurable TDP, to boost the performance to desktop levels, or at least the closest they can kind of get to it on that part. More interesting is that Lenovo is offering its own version of the RX 9070 XT as a GPU option. Lenovo has produced Radeon cards before, but it has typically catered towards lower-end GPUs like the RX 7600 and RX 6600. Taking a closer look at the photos of the card, Lenovo's 9070 XT features a 3-slot bracket for the 3-slot design, which isn't as common as it probably should be. That's a good thing. The card looks like it uses a rigid body solution and has vertical fins with space for air to exit at the top and the bottom. It's also using a flow-through design with the PCB stopping just before the third fan. The card's extended height also allows Lenovo to use larger fans for its 3-fan design. Like how Dell made an RTX 4090 for its Alienware PCs, which wasn't half bad, Lenovo's GPUs will most likely be relegated to its pre-built systems. NVIDIA and AMD often allow OEMs to make their own cards as long as they're not independently sold to DIY. You can let us know if you want us to try and get one of these in the future. If there's enough interest, I'll do it. I'm more interested kind of in the desktop, really. And if we do that, we might as well do the video card. Just depends on the time. But anyway, let us know. All right, next one. Frore Systems has unveiled a new cooling solution. This is a direct-to-chip liquid cooling cold plate that it's calling the LiquidJet solution. Many of you may likely be familiar with Frore from its AirJet cooling solution, which was one of Gordon Ma-Un's most watched interviews. It's worth checking out if you've never seen it. The company's LiquidJet is new, though. The company describes it as, quote, a completely new approach to DLC cold plates, end quote, featuring, quote, complex 3D short-loop jet channel microstructures, end quote, that's designed to improve heat transfer efficiency. I'll be honest, reading DLC cold plates caused way more initial panic than probably was necessary. Good news, Bethesda hasn't gotten to them. In this context, that's direct-to-chip liquid cooling cold plate, not horse armor. Frore claims the design enables, quote, 2x higher hotspot power density, end quote, and, quote, 10x lower pressure drop, end quote. This is as compared to competing solutions. It also advertises that the LiquidJet can be custom tailored to match any SoC's power map. The company shared a performance comparison between its LiquidJet cold plate and what it calls the quote, best skived cold plate, end quote. Skiving is a manufacturing process that involves pushing the metal into microfins, something that we've shown in factories that we've toured in the past. In this test, both solutions were used to cool a 1400 watt SoC. Frore says that the LiquidJet's microstructure pressure drop measured 0.24 psi, compared to the skived plate they tested at 0.94. The LiquidJet promotes its ability to support unreleased and even unspecified at this point, as in there are no specs, NVIDIA architectures out to 2029. The page also shows the temperature distribution across the die of a Blackwell Ultra chip with the LiquidJet installed. While it looks promising, LiquidJet isn't aimed at consumer systems. Instead, Frore is targeting enterprise and AI data center workloads. So this is probably too expensive to bring to consumer in its current manifestation, but a lot of times we'll see technologies like this work their way into consumer one way or the other, or inspire other designs that are more cost effective while still improving on what we have. So we're gonna keep an eye on this one. I'm interested in it. I don't really know that we have any meaningful way to test it, but it's kind of cool to see, and we'll see if there's any opportunity to maybe do something with them in the future, to look at it from an engineering standpoint or something. All right, next up, the U.S. to levy tariffs on chips at 100%. Again, it seems to, I feel like we have this story like every 2 months at this point. It's like it's stated and then it goes away and then it's stated again, and it seems to commonly happen on Fridays, and then normally within a couple days it's taken back and the market kind of... Anyway, we don't need to get into that. Seemingly in a bid to encourage domestic production and not to manipulate the market at all, the US has drawn up plans to levy tariffs up to 100% on foreign-made chips. As we understand the tariff policy, chip importers would need to maintain a 1-to-1 ratio of US-made chips to externally sourced ones. Theoretically, if performance and function isn't a factor, you could just make tons of MOSFETs or something to offset this. A failure to maintain a 1-to-1 ratio would result in 100% tariffs on all of their imported chips and imports of semiconductors, or all kinds. Again, it's not just CPUs and GPUs. Those are just the commonly known ones. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, pictured here auditioning for a Men's Warehouse ad, reportedly framed the issue as a national economic security matter. Following the reveal of this plan on October 1st, Reuters reported that Taiwan, where the world's largest chip producer TSMC is based, would not comply with regulations to disproportionately bring its chip production to the U.S. TSMC has plants in Arizona, where they recently fabricated the first US-made Blackwell chips. Reuters wrote, quote, Taiwan will not agree to a deal with the United States for half of all semiconductor production to take place in the country, end quote. Now, TSMC is pretty interesting. It's offered Taiwan a silicon shield of sorts that gives it strategic significance and has turned it into an economic powerhouse. Both of these factors have complicated China's territorial claims. As TSMC has moved more production capabilities to the US, there's been ongoing negotiation to preserve its strategic importance in Taiwan as well. TSMC, like NVIDIA, finds itself in between two governments. It's just for TSMC, it's between Taiwan and the United States. Whereas for NVIDIA, it is between the United States and China. So for TSMC, the US has been pushing for more stateside manufacturing to benefit its own national security concerns. And for Taiwan, this potentially weakens Taiwan's national security and weakens its so-called silicon shield. So Taiwan's government has been pushing TSMC to preserve its best nodes for manufacturing only in its Taiwan fabs. So this is kind of the push and pull between the two governments. Now, TSMC is investing in fabs in the US, including in Arizona, basically down the road from Intel. But it's also said in the past that its cutting-edge processes would first debut in Taiwan. Surprising at this point, probably nobody. Details are pretty scarce right now on how this proposed tariff plan would actually work, just like all the other recently and chaotically imposed tariffs that were done through executive decisions and without congressional approval. And we talked about that in our 2-part tariffs documentary if you want to learn about that from the computer industry side of things. Part 1's on this channel. Part 2 went to GNCA. We'll link that below if you missed it. So anyway, it seems the approach continues to be kind of throwing a percent out there and then figuring out the precise details later. This is an enormously complex industry. Broadly speaking, I personally do not think governments understand it. That's all of it. Like, doesn't matter what party, doesn't matter what political belief. It just seems to me that there is a deficiency in understanding of technology at government levels, and so we're going to see the impacts of that in the computer industry the most. But anyway, that's my opinion. One of the uncertainties here related to imported completed products. For example, it's not clear if an OEM like Dell would need to independently track and declare each piece of silicon in something like a desktop computer, and likewise source 1-to-1 for US alternatives, which still largely don't exist. Just the logistics and procurement costs alone would go up, which would eventually affect consumer pricing. Silicon isn't just in CPUs and GPUs. You can find it in all kinds of devices across PCBs, again, including things like MOSFETs and switching components. To add even more complexity to the mix, while Intel still operates fabs in the US, a significant portion of its production, especially advanced nodes, occurs abroad, either through its own fabs or through TSMC's when it partners with them. In addition to the US, Intel also has fabs in Ireland and Israel, and it has assembly sites in China, Costa Rica, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Intel also hires TSMC's to produce its GPUs and many of its modern CPUs. Now here's where it gets interesting. The United States government now owns 10% of Intel. So here's our thought. If Intel gets tariffed 100% on chips it brings into the United States, then does that mean that the US government is shooting itself in the foot for its 10% investment? Or does it mean that it's getting basically a mail-in rebate? Or is it like siphoning money out of the company or something? Let's just follow it through the logical steps. The US government taxes Intel 100% on a chip import. The US government owns 10% of Intel. The US government bought 10% of Intel with money from the US government. So when the US government taxes Intel 100% on a chip import, which is what a tariff is, then does that mean that the United States government is getting like a cash back program on the money it used to buy 10% of Intel? That is an actual question. I am asking it. That is not rhetorical. I am asking that question. It seems it is either diabolically clever or maybe unbelievably incompetent. I don't know which one it is. They are either shooting themselves in the foot for their investment or they're getting a cash refund. Like, it's like a credit card where you get 1% cash back. I don't know. Let's move on. AMD. Also eyeing Intel, but for different reasons. Speaking of Intel, according to Semaphore, AMD is in the early stages of talking with Intel to use its fabs. This comes on the heels of the US government taking a 10% stake in Intel, Nvidia buying $5 billion in Intel stock, and looming US tariff plans that we just talked about that would penalize chip makers who don't manufacture at least half of their chips domestically. So AMD now is getting more serious about looking at Intel. It does seem like it aligns with this other news. That's right. At this point, everybody's in bed with everybody. It's a classic friends with stock options relationship. We're not judging. Look, it's 2025. Everybody should be responsibly discussing their vesting options with their partners. Details are currently scarce, with Semaphore writing, quote, "It's unclear how much of their manufacturing would shift to Intel if the two companies reach a deal, or whether it would come with a direct investment by AMD, similar to deals cut by other companies," end quote. By other companies, they mean basically all of them at this point. OpenAI to AMD, AMD to OpenAI, NVIDIA to OpenAI, OpenAI to NVIDIA, X, AI and Grok, NVIDIA, Oracle, and like all of them. That's what they mean by other companies. They also said, quote, "It's possible that no agreement will be reached," end quote. So anyway, AMD and Intel have been kind of hinting at this for a while, on and off over the years. It does make sense. AMD actually used to own fabs, and we've frequently brought up the fact that long ago, I think it was AMD's founder stated, quote, "Real men have fabs," end quote. And they later got rid of them. And this was before Dr. Lisa Su took over, who's still there now. And it's worked out as a fabless chip provider, same as NVIDIA. It's worked out pretty well for them. But Intel's primary significance at this point is the fact that it is one of basically two companies that's capable of manufacturing high-end silicon. Even though it has had problems with its own products lately, it's still up there with the TSMC. It's just losing right now. But that doesn't mean that Intel can't be used. But hey, if AMD is able to diversify its supply chain, it does seem like it would be, hopefully, a good thing for pricing. If that means that they can bring costs down, if there's TSMC and Intel are able to compete with each other on pricing quotes for wafers and things like that, that should be a good thing for pricing. That should be a good thing for consumers. It just depends, on if that gets passed to the consumer or not, and if AI continues to suck up all the supply. So that's gonna be it for this one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to support us directly, or patreon.com/gamersnexus, and we will see you all next time.